Welcome back, everyone, to the Party Talk podcast. I'm so excited about today because I'm interviewing the beautiful, talented, kind, amazing Emily White. That's right. Nepotism is real on this episode. I'm interviewing Emily because she's a resident hall director at a university here in Phoenix. And I'm going to ask her all questions about her job and how she works with youth. And honestly, I share all of our stuff too. With Vibe 18 and Party Point O with her, and she always gives me the best ideas. So let's welcome Emily White to the show. How's it going, Emily?
It's good.
So you work with youth.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what you do.
Yeah. So I'm a resident hall director, like Jake said, but my role really just focuses on building a team of leaders that then impact the rest of the hall. So the idea is that you invest in these, 8 to 12 students really deeply, and then they can then impact other students because they're getting developed in that way.
And you've been doing this role for about 6 to 7 years now. We've been living on campus. It's been awesome. And what keeps you going? Because you're one of the longest running resident hall directors on campus here. And people are like, what? You've been doing this that long? Don't you want to move off campus? But you love your job. And can you tell us more about why you love working with students?
Yes. So the wonderful thing about working with students is that there is a new group every year that they kind of breathe new life, new excitement. It's new for them. And then for the ones that are coming back for maybe a second, third, fourth year, they get new ideas. They're spurred on by the new energy that these new students bring. And college age is just so fun because they're just out there experiencing the world. They're all the classic, oh my gosh, mom and dad are here. Oh, who am I college moment. And it's just really fun because it feels like they can do anything. So they're willing to try anything. And for me, my personality, I think that's what keeps me coming back for year 2, year 3, now going into year 7, is that every year is new. So I could do the job and be like, oh, this worked, 7 years ago. So we're going to do it again the next year. And we're going to do it again the next year. But to keep it fun for me and to keep it fun for my students, it's how can we make this fun in a different way than maybe how we made it fun the year before? And obviously for some things, oh yeah, this works. Let's do this again and again. But how can we tweak it and keep it new, fresh, exciting, fun for this new batch of students? Because what freshman college students thought was really fun 7 years ago, or a funny, relevant joke, just isn't as funny or relevant now as it was, my first year.
Well said. I think that there's a lot of relatability between the drug prevention field, because as we're employed as adults to help youth make better decisions around drugs and alcohol, it can kind of feel scary. Well, how do we lead young people though? How do we get them involved and engaged? And it sounds like you take a new proactive approach every single year of, hey, we're going to learn from what we did last year, but it's not going to stay the same because the students have changed. Our culture has changed. So there's a lot of crossover between what we're doing. And that's what I was hoping this episode, why I think it's going to be cool for everyone, is because when you're in different fields, we might think that we've heard everything under the sun when it comes to drug prevention. But when you cross different fields, you can always learn from new people. And so my next question, I'm going to start with a story. I think you remember this, and then I've got a question about team building. But I remember I was going to speak at college orientation season, and I remember leaving for that trip feeling sorry for you because you had a new group of students, and they were in our living room, and it was supposed to be the first time they're meeting. It was team bonding, and I walked in the room. And it was one of the most awkward things I've ever seen. They are scrunched into our living room. No one is talking. They're just looking at their fingers, looking at their phones, trying not to rub knees and elbows on the couch. It was so bad. And I remember leaving that trip. I come back maybe a few days later, or maybe it must have been a few days later because the weekend having orientation speaking. And then Monday or Tuesday morning, I'm back, and it does not even feel like the same group. It felt like they're best friends now who just happen to work together. They're laughing, telling jokes. They have memories. Like I walked into our apartment again and it is just buzzing with energy and friendship. And so my question for you, Emily White, is how how do you help facilitate that when students are coming together as a new group, a new entity, and developing relationships and feeling good about one another and building something really, really cool? Like, what advice could you give us, or how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. Oh, I remember that feeling that you were describing vividly. It wasn't a very big living room. It was like temporary housing until our house was done being built. And every year it keeps you like, oh no, this group isn't gonna click. This isn't it. We hired wrong. But just remembering to lean into the awkward. I think that's the biggest thing, not getting too worried in the front end that this isn't gonna work. Because there's always that day for every single team my last 7 years where it's like day 2, 3, maybe 4, depending on the group, where we have to like, all right, everyone settle down before we like dive into our training activities. Whereas the first few days, they're just sitting there kind of ready to start. And it's totally like you said, like they've been friends for forever by a few days. So how, and in my mind, like how do we kickstart that? So years after and years prior, I've done this. And giving them something to do. So I think a lot of times when we have a team mixer, we're thinking, oh, they want to get to know each other right away. Like, let's get together and hang out before we dive into this training portion where we're learning, and there's not really much time for mingling and getting to know one another in a deeper sense. But how do you do that when everyone's just meeting each other for the first time? And some of your students are probably, they're just naturally, they love meeting new people. They're asking them where they grew up. They know the classic get to know you questions. They live for the meeting a new friend, like those classic characters. Like, to me, there are no strangers, just friends I haven't met yet, like, which is me to a T. But not every student you work with is going to be like that, and that's totally fine. But how do we jumpstart those relationships sooner in the week when they're just getting to know each other, so that all of our other training times can be way more beneficial because they feel like they're in it together. So giving them an activity to do, not just getting to know one another isn't the activity, but something else that they can focus on together. And I think of some of the things I've done with teams in the past to kind of get that fun that they've bonded over something that they've done together, or have a funny moment to look back to later on. Like, remember when we did this? So even simple things like a tweak on a photo scavenger hunt, which feels like a classic conference camp kind of game. Instead of doing that, making it, again, this is how you change for each generation of students that are going to help, making it a TikTok scavenger hunt. So we had a different prompt that they had to create this TikTok. So one of them was creating a TikTok with incorporating all of the names of the people on your team. So we've been in smaller groups so they could do that. And that says something about that person and what they bring to that team. And that was one of the prompts. There were 7 different ones. We gave them a chunk of time to go out and came back, and we all watched everyone's video. So even if you weren't on that team, we were watching all of them on the television together. And this one team, I can just picture it. They totally committed to a theme and delivered seamlessly. So the prompt was to write a rap about the team members that they're with. And they go to the top of the parking garage. It is drizzling rain. And they turn on car headlights and are standing in front of the car headlights with the rain drizzling, like totally R&B music video vibes. And they are rapping and like leaning in front of their car lights, and everyone in the room, even though they weren't on the team, were like, oh, like freaking out about just how funny it was, like how that they committed to the bit. And everyone was talking about it all year. Just having that to point back to, like, remember when we did that? That was so funny. So then we're able to dive into the trainings and stuff that they've had that moment to bond together, that they're able to get to know one another because they've done this activity together. And that moment where you bring everybody and just say, so just get to know each other doesn't feel as awkward because they've now had the shared experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that really can jumpstart a team.
Yeah. That's such a good illustration because I remember watching that video. It was hilarious. It was so good. And what I'm taking from that is that we can't expect students to be social butterflies. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Depending on your work, probably us in drug prevention, we're not dealing with the most social butterflies. So we have to help facilitate something that can allow them to get to know each other, but it's got to be fun and active. So sitting someone, plopping them next to each other and saying, hey, get to know each other, or just a conversation game isn't really enough. We should get creative and do something like that. Can you remember, and you can just kind of list off if there are any that you remember, other games that you would use? Maybe there's some standard ones or some creative ones like that that you remember as well, because I bet you some people are going to steal the TikTok challenge, but any other that you can share?
Yeah, I think honestly, TikTok is where I get most of my really great team bonding ideas. Almost every single bachelor party theme, you can do a sober spin on. And it's funny because they're able to create a bunch of different activities based on one theme. So, for example, like my building this year is going to be called Santa Cruz. So making everything that coastal cowboy vibe that's kind of in right now, and just doing all the different activities that have to do with that I see on TikTok. Survivor themed nights. We had a team that was super into Survivor, or even whatever the big show is that is coming out, like a few years ago when Stranger Things was having a new season that came out right before our students came back. We did Stranger Things themed, kind of like a clue where they had a riddle that they had to solve that led them to a next riddle, and it led them kind of all over the building and different parts of campus. Playing volleyball together, it doesn't have to be a good theme, or it can be really simple, a classic thing, a Bigs cornhole tournament, something like that.
Yeah, I remember you doing at some point too, because you would keep a pulse on what's popular with the students. And so when Top Gun was coming out, is you did they had to make their own call signs and create a helmet, and they loved that. It allowed them to get to know each other, get creative to do something, so there wasn't the pressure to be talking. That was a good one. This one you mentioned, you're making gingerbread houses with cookie dough, or I guess sandcastles, right? It's Santa Cruz. Yeah. So stuff like that I think is super inspiring. And if that sounds daunting to anybody here, is you can just look up, like you can Google top trending teen things, or like top 5 trending on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. You don't have to be sitting on TikTok forever or be like have it downloaded on your phone to know what students are actually getting into. You can just Google it or research it, and it'll pop up. There'll be a short article, or even better is to ask your students who are coming back from last year if they want to lead some welcome activities, and ask them, hey, what are some themes that are going on right now, some trends, so they can help you come up with those ideas, and you don't have to be sitting on TikTok or social media.
Yeah, that is great. I'm going to talk about how you said leaning on your students that are coming back from previous years. I think that's something that I really relied on. They bring the energy, they bring the fun. They're also somebody to maybe talk to when another student that's new, learning the ropes, isn't sure what to do. They can go to a peer, and they're seen kind of as someone that can help them bounce ideas off them, someone who's been there before, someone who walked through them with it. And that's something that maybe not all your students realize, that they're seen as an extra leader because they've seen and been there before. And I always like to set up my returners before everybody comes back and be like, hey, like, I want you to be a leader. This is what I want from you. When you're going to get Dutch Bros or Starbucks, like, you're inviting other people on the team, those other kind of like team bonding things that just happen naturally outside of the time that maybe you're facilitating an organized activity. You're kind of having them be a part of that, building the team, building the memories, getting that kind of solid foundation of friendship so that they're able to have more fun.
So, question, because you have a team of 12, you're 8 to 12 students, and you're doing a lot of communication with them, and holding them accountable for certain responsibilities. So first quick question is, how do you communicate with your team? Because that's one of the things that people in prevention say is like, they're not responding to my texts, or they use phone calls.
Yeah, no, they don't.
So yeah, how do you find young people are communicating these days, and how do you adjust to them, or what do you use to communicate that's worked?
Yeah. So we use an app called GroupMe. We've had a lot of success with that. This year I'm trying just again a text group, but individually basically reach out to students via, hey, can you like this message so I know that you know this update? And we kind of set that standard right away in the beginning of the year. If you're not liking a message that has pertinent information that we're saying, hey, like this when you've read it, then we reach out and say, hey, can you like this message? Did you read it? And then they'll go in and like it. And having a weekly check-in time, also just to kind of catch up in maybe anything that was missed, like an in-person meeting is really helpful.
That's a really good idea. I think, number one, having a process where it says, when I send this out, this is my expectation from you, and the whole team knows it. So, and like you said, doing that at the beginning. So when you're setting culture, you're having fun, but when you're getting down to work, like you can kind of set those values and, hey, just like you would want me to respond to one of your texts, but I know in a group setting, it's not always appropriate, or it's a little annoying if everyone responds, but here's what we'll do. Like the message. I love that. It's not blowing up everybody's phones, and it's a channel that they're using specifically for you probably, or maybe a few other groups. Okay. The next part of my question is, I'm sure that there are some people that work at the university and maybe are frustrated because it's a student position that they're working with. They're student leaders, and students are busy. They've got a lot going on. They're doing like extracurriculars. They don't know maybe what they want to do for a living. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And I bet you they drop the ball sometimes.
It happens.
Right? That's a nice way to say it. But I've noticed that you tend to be pretty good at building up your team, and then your students held accountable, but they still love their jobs. So what do you think is the difference between the people that do your job that are maybe frustrated with students' performance and accountability, and the people that are happy with it and say, hey, my students are doing a great job? Do you have any ideas of what they might be doing differently?
Yeah. I think it's just a good reminder, exactly how you started out this question. They're just college students. They're just students. So, I mean, 31 years old, I've had a time to figure out processes and figure out what works for me and my personality to stay organized. They're still figuring all of that out. So I think always whenever I'm frustrated, it's good to remind myself of that. And so I think people, if they would do that, would find a lot more success. And then also looking back on me, how is maybe the process I've set up not working? And how can I change this process to make it better? To make it less frustrating for me, less frustrating for my student, because then I'm not having to reach out and be like, hey, this is done. Hey, can I get this? Hey, can I get that? But changing the process so that we're able to catch up on everything during our meetings, changing maybe a due date so it's something where we're in person together or we can work on it together, setting up some kind of homework hour. For me, that's what's really helped me be successful, not get stressed with college students or high school students as they're, again, just figuring out who they are and how they work. And some of my students, they're like, no, I don't need you checking in person. And because they've got it figured out, they're maybe a little bit more type A, detail oriented. But as a person who I grew up being more the spontaneous, fun, it'll get done when it gets done kind of spirit, helping those students keep on task. I think having that system in place where they're able to follow up in person is a huge thing.
It sounds like you have a weekly meeting, you call the one-on-one, with the students to go through their expectations and where they are. And you talked about processes. So maybe if there's any things that you go through with the one-on-one, what that looks like, and then what are those specific checklists or processes that could be helpful for other people?
I've built out called just a one-on-one check-in list, and it has all the things that are required of them to do for their job. So for them, they have to have a bulletin board once a month. They have to submit a record of the conversations that they had that detail out, oh, maybe the student is having a hard time with family. We want to make sure we keep them on our radar, make sure they're feeling supported, or have things that we want to celebrate with them. Maybe they got a new job. They're, have a new boyfriend, girlfriends, things like good and bad, but we want to just keep tabs, making sure everyone's feeling cared and supported for. And then they have every other week, they have an event that they have to throw for their floor. So they have a form that they submit and tell us, outline what the event's going to be. And then they submit after that, let us know, hey, this is what worked, this is what didn't. So those are kind of the main sections that they have to do. For each point, I look back on, okay, what's been done? What did you do this last point? So for the first one, bulletin boards, this last one, this is what was really great. Maybe next time, let's try this. If it was maybe a little weak, didn't have much in terms of helpful information, or students really seem to connect with it. And then looking forward to the next thing. So whenever they come in person, they're always getting a recap of what they did great, or maybe they can improve. And then looking forward to, okay, what are the next deadlines that are coming up for this topic? So if there's anything that's been missed, all right, let's do it right now. And they know during that meeting that if any of those sections aren't up to date, that's what we're going to be spending our time on in our one-on-one hour meeting. And I found that most of my students, if I set that at the beginning of the year, hey, this is kind of what it is. It's your hour to do with me as you want. If you want to use that as kind of a homework hour and we work on things together, that's great. But if you don't, then we get to do fun kind of development stuff together. They want to learn a new skill, figure out how to knit. They want to do slacklining, learn to longboard, where we spend that time just doing fun things together, learning different things if they don't need that additional help touching in or keeping up to date on all of their tasks that are required of them.
What I love about that is that your students have the freedom to work as they would on their own schedule and figure it out. But you've got the deadline of the one-on-one where they get to hang out with you if they've done their work already, do something fun. Or if they haven't, it's like, well, great, we set aside this time. And that's why I love the idea of working meetings. Like meetings just for information's sake, you could just put in an email. But if it's something that can be more than that, like what you've made it, then that's something that they look forward to. They get the feeling of accomplishment. You get to do something as a group or as a team. And that just makes it sound really, really fun, really impactful. And you get to avoid all the frustrations of them saying, I didn't get it done. And so what I'm taking away for our job is, as much as you can do in meetings, have a regular check-in where they know their expectations and what you're going to review. And then even that third tip of make it fun. Like if you've got a one-on-one with your students, this is going to be a development opportunity for them. They get to journal, they get to share with you, they get to reflect on everything they did. And I will go on a limb to say that students want to make you proud. They want to show off the good work that you're doing. So just what a confidence builder for these students to get to have you as a mentor. And remember that if you're listening to this, that you're a student mentor and you're getting to pour into their lives. So that's just a really, really sweet opportunity. And I've seen with you, Emily, that's why when students leave your staff, like they're sad, which is not good, but it is good. They love you and they love spending time with you, and they could all speak on how you've impacted their lives because you've set aside time, even if it's just an hour a week with them, where you're learning their interests, asking about them. I remember one time somebody wanted to learn how to knit because they just never learned, and YouTube hopped on YouTube and knitted together, which is just super cool. So if anybody can learn from those things that Emily shared, that's fantastic. The last question that I have for you, Emily White, is this. You have this thing called passive programming where students will make bulletin boards, or they'll have some sort of education where not an entire event is planned, but they get to set something up in the lobby or in the hallways. And sometimes you're talking about prevention or mental health or setting good habits or relieving stress. I'm curious, has there been any projects in that realm that you've been really impressed by or that you could speak to and people get inspired by?
Yeah. Passive program. So there's a bulletin board on every floor where your student lives, and the RAs are responsible to fill that with information. And again, just like the fun bonding events, making it relevant, but also have helpful information. I think the most fun or engaging ones are ones where students can put either an idea they have. So they talk, for example, about like self-care or time management, and they have some tips and tricks on one side, but then there's a section of the bulletin board that allows people to engage with it and say, this is my favorite way to manage my time, or this is an idea that maybe wasn't on the board. Something that they either drop a pin, just stick it in the bulletin board, something where they can write in it with a permanent marker, something that they can let the rest of their floor know what their ideas are, how they can engage with it, something that allows them to take something away. Whether that's a flyer with recipes of how to cook cake in a mug in a microwave in your dorm, or tips for if you're new going to the gym, things that they can take away with them. That's just a little half sheet flyer, a bag of tea with things written on it, something that allows them to interact with it, even though nobody else is around.
Cool. This has been awesome, Emily. Thanks for being on the Party Talk podcast, where we empower leaders in youth drug prevention. I hope that everyone has listened, has taken some notes if they're not driving, because I've definitely got some ideas from you over the years. And lucky enough, I get to live with you and be your husband. So I'm always getting this kind of gold. If you found this episode valuable, you can do two things for us. Number one is you can subscribe to the show so you get alerted every Monday when we do a new episode. And two, you can share with a friend. Anybody who's in the prevention or works with youth, send them this episode and let them impact youth better every single day. We'll see y'all on the next episode of Party Talk.